Amen. And today, we have something a little bit different. You'll see on stage we have these beautiful candles. They're called yahrzeit candles, and that's because today we are remembering Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day on the Hebrew calendar. And Yom HaShoah, there are two Hebrew words there. Yom means day, and HaShoah means catastrophe, or utter destruction. And this term is used specifically in reference, this day rather, is used specifically in reference to the Holocaust, to World War II and all of the devastation that the Jews suffered during that time. And the Holocaust is the largest manifestation of anti-Semitism in recent history. And if you think about it, it was less than 100 years ago. And that blows my mind. Less than 100 years ago. And so we're going to take a few moments to watch a brief video of a Holocaust survivor. And this Holocaust survivor happens to be my great-great-uncle, who lived during the Holocaust, who suffered at the hands of those who were persecuting him. And to give you a little bit of background of his family, which consisted of his 2 parents and 9 other siblings, 12 of them total. Of all 12 of them, only 3 survived the Holocaust. My great-great-uncle, my great-great-aunt, and my great-grandfather. And so he and his family, they lived in a town in eastern Poland, which is now modern-day Ukraine. And before the Holocaust, his town was close to 70% Jewish. And after the Holocaust, there wasn't a single Jew left. They either died, they were murdered, or they fled to pursue their safety. So he's going to tell you some of what he experienced. Take a look at this video.
My name is Henry Boris Zipper. I was born in a town, it's called Mikulince, eastern Poland. They took, the Ukrainian militiamen, they took some Jews that they escaped from Hitler, from western Poland, and some Jewish men from our town that had beards, that were religious men. They made them put down the talis in the tefillin and took them near a river, the banks were very high. They made him pray, and then the machine gun him, and they fell down in the river. Here I had my oldest sister. She was married already. She lived in another town. When the Germans occupied the town where she lived, they gathered all the men, not only young or old, all the men. They gathered all the men, and they took them also in a very, like a hill. And they put them all in the top of the hill and machine gunned them. They fell down in the ravine. When the women said, kill us also, they took a man away, kill us also. The Germans said, no, it's enough to take the honey away from the bees, and the bees will die themselves. The Ukrainian militiamen with some German soldiers, they came to the Jewish homes. They took, they didn't ask, they just took somebody from the house to dig a big ditch. I was one of them. We went to dig a big ditch, wide and deep. There were a lot of Russian soldiers dead, and some of them were just wounded. And we had to bury him. After we finished digging the ditch, we threw in all the dead and wounded Russian soldiers into that ditch. In the top, we threw the dead horses on top of them. And then we covered them with dirt. You could see the dirt moving because a lot of the Russian soldiers were still alive. This was getting already dark, like in the afternoon. Then they turned the machine guns on us. I was wounded in my left shoulder, but I right away fell down and made believe that I am dead. Then only me and one boy survived that. All of a sudden, it was early in the morning. All of a sudden, everybody in town was awakened, knocking the doors, Jews out, in German and in Ukrainian. And some of the people came out in their bed clothes, and some of them barefooted, and they start getting Jews to be taken away. Some of them were shot right in their beds. And my mother was among those being killed there. They shot her to death. And people started running in every direction, started running away, starting to hide. And some of them were shot while running. And they took them to the railroad station, and then they loaded them into, there was other boxcars already filled with Jews from other towns. And they put them in boxcars and took them away. And to this day, I don't know where they took them. I don't know if they took them to Auschwitz or where, I don't know where. They took my father and my sister and baby and my sister-in-law and baby. They took them away in that train.
Do you have anything that you'd like to say to the people that are watching about your experience?
Well, like I like to say, like a lot of non-Jewish people, they say it never happened. It sure happened because I lived through it. I lived through all that, and I hope that'll never repeat itself. Like and nowadays, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in this country, and especially in Europe. Imagine, in Poland, there used to be 3.5 million Jews in Poland. Now there are not Jews left, and they are anti-Semites. I think what happened to all of the Jews, especially now, seeing what's going on in Israel, and after the Holocaust, Jews are still being killed. That bothers me, because I am very much for Israel. When something goes on in Israel and somebody being killed, I suffer. It hurts me.
Traditionally, as I mentioned before, we have these yahrzeit candles lit. And the reason why the Jewish people light these candles is to signify, to remember the passing of a loved one. And so we have 6 of these candles lit tonight for each of the 6 million Jews that were murdered. And the Jews, one thing that is unique about the Jewish faith is that they often do things specifically to remember certain events and certain occurrences. And they normally detail, again, specific things that the Lord would have them to remember. When we talk about the major Moedim of Yom Kippur, Yom Teruah, Sukkot, and others, we are remembering things that are significant to our faith, things that are significant to our salvation. And the Jews, they remember these Moedim that oftentimes will celebrate things that the Lord is doing, but they also remember certain things that did not quite go their way. They remember acts of anti-Semitism. We recently celebrated Purim, which is a minor festival, and this celebration remembers the book of Esther and how the Lord delivered the Jewish people from the Persians. It, again, is an example of anti-Semitism in the Bible. The Lord, he also commanded the Israelites to remember the Amalekites, and the Amalekites were enemies of Israel. They were also an anti-Semitic group. And interestingly, Haman, the villain of Purim, was an Amalekite. Very good. Boo. And so the Lord told the Israelites, you are going to utterly destroy the Amalekites, but never forget the Amalekites. Never forget them, because they were against you. They were not for you. And similarly, we as Christians were called to remember these same things that the Israelites were, but also different things. Every month, when we partake in communion together, we always say, do this in remembrance of me, meaning Jesus. The Lord, he commands us to remember significant events, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it's only right that we also remember the Holocaust. And as we remember the Holocaust, we should also be prompted to action. We should be prompted to advocate against anti-Semitism and for the Jewish community. And this should also extend to other people that we see suffering. As we just talked about, Great Commission Media Ministries does work in Iran with the civil rights movement that's happening there. I'm reminded, when we talk about anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust specifically, of the words of Rabbi Jesus when he gave a parable of the Good Samaritan. And this is in Luke 10, and there was a lawyer, he said to Jesus, Rabbi, what shall I do to inherit eternal life. And they went back and forth a little bit, and the lawyer, he answered his own question, essentially, by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself, which Jesus affirmed and told him to go and do himself. And so it picks up, it says, but he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him for dead. Does that sound familiar? Now by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. One of the things that sticks out to me about this passage is that the most unsuspecting character ended up being the hero. It was a Samaritan who was an enemy of the Jews that helped this Jewish man up who fell amongst the robbers. And it wasn't the Jewish Levite, it wasn't the Jewish priest, it was the Samaritan, the most unexpected character. And the thing that is so sad to me is that the church during the Holocaust was the Levite. It was the priest. It was the church that should have advocated for the Jewish people. And we didn't. They didn't. Instead, they walked around on the other side and they let it happen. And there's this alternate writing of the Good Samaritan that's sort of poetic, and it's by Stephen Smith, who was a co-founder of one of the largest Holocaust museums in the United Kingdom. And it's reflective of the reality of the Holocaust. Stephen Smith, he wrote, there was once a man going about his business, trying to live out his life peacefully and without offense to those around him. One day, as he went about his life, a group of men set upon him. They robbed him, and they stripped him, and they left him on the side of the road for dead. Presently, along came an educated, God-fearing, and good man, a man known for his generosity and charity. He saw the man who had been beaten on the road, and he crossed over the road and carried on his way. Shortly, along came a priest, a well-respected man of wisdom and of learning. Seeing his neighbor in distress, he too crossed over on the other side. After all, he would not be seen helping a Jew. And so the Jew lay in the gutter, waiting for the Good Samaritan. But there was no Good Samaritan. Not this time. Today, church, we need to be prompted to action. We need to be prompted to justice, as God defines it. We need to be prompted to help those who are suffering. As we remember the Holocaust today, let us look at it and pray, but not only pray, also work to make sure nothing like it ever happens again for the Jewish people and for all people around the world. Let's pray.